That was number 160.
Okay, Celtic, all right, Mhabab, it seems we may have resolved our technical issues on this side and are ready to proceed. Thank you for holding the fort, so to speak, and welcome everybody to another Wu-Sabat Outformation class, Freaks and the Perfect Creature, part 4. As I say, happy Gremlin day as well, everybody, in that regard. Hopefully, as I say, should be stable. If it isn't, you need to just feedback. We've been having some internet issues this morning and into the afternoon. So if it is a problem, then we'll just have to reschedule rather than hit you with the poor quality. Okay, so we are doing something slightly different today because based on the last class, we're asking a lot about the sort of ancestral connection side. So do a slight diversion to deal with that today, and then come back to the point that we were on, Freaks and the Perfect Creature. As the beautiful words are beautiful, it all ties in. So we certainly give great thanks to Parnatharu and their 1 cent Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn, because it all ties in nicely and connects to what we've been discussing over these parts of the class of Freaks and the Perfect Creature. Okay, well, let's get into the proper start today. So no polls today, just because, as I say, we may have some technical problems. I don't want it to all freeze up, so we'll leave that for the moment. But obviously, if there is sound issues or you cannot hear me properly, then please feedback into the chat, which I'll run through shortly if you're joining us for the first time. But as is proper, we will start off with a cultural expression, Partakyud, the affirmation. If you join us for the first time, welcome. My name is the Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn. We are the United Sabians Worldwide. This class has been brought to you by All Eyes on Egypt, Midlands and the North. We are, as I say, Sabians, Musbatu, as we say in our language. And to start off the class properly, with positive energy connected to our ancestors, we're going to say Partakyud, known as the affirmation. So I'm going to say it in our language, Sabaik, and then translate into English for full and proper understanding. Adoy kale namazurat Wu-Fakur ame kasam un empa paut anuki jawef pa ashuk empa paut Wu-Kale ashuk kawun jawef neya anuki kasam un empa paut Wu-Pa paut kawun kasam un emneya anuki wahu ameh pa paut Wu-Pa paut kawun wahu ameh neya nakuk kadur najo ameh kasam un empa paut Wu-Habub ame mushachas nakuk kadur kawan kale pafef nakuk dayur jawef pa paut ame wase ame dayarni kawun lake bakoy jawef pa paut anuki abed bi nafashni pa paut kawun anuki Pa paut kadur nakuk kadur Pa paut amul nakuk amul. So that was the Partakyud, the affirmation. We started by saying begin all prayers and thinking as a part of the all. And then we said, I am in the divine love of the all expanding, and all divine love is in me. I am a part of the all expanding, and the all expanding is a part of me. I am one as the all expanding, and the all expanding is one as me. I can succeed as part of the all expanding and fail as an individual person. I can be all that I want in the all expanding, as long as my want is to stay in the all expanding. I am never by myself. The all expanding is I am. The all expanding can, I can. The all expanding does, I do. So that was Partakyud. there, as I say, to start the class positively. If you join us for the first time, we are on the Zoom platform and also broadcasting live to Facebook. It is two slightly different experiences. So this is describing the Zoom experience on the Zoom platform. If you do want to join us on Zoom for the full interactive experience, then you're free to do so, but fine to stay on Facebook. We're not monitoring questions during the live class. So if you do have questions, they'll be answered after the class has finished at some point today. So on your left-hand side, you've got your audio settings there. So if you need to adjust your sound for any reason, you can do so by selecting those options. We've got 3 icons here, options or menu options. So here, the first one is chat. So if you do have any messages that are not questions, please, or feedback, for example, the sound is not right, etc., then by all means put that in the chat and select everyone. I need to adjust this, keep doing it, forget to do so, but select everyone so that when everybody can see your messages there, so don't get duplicate messages. So select everyone, because the default, it just basically sends a message to ourselves. So we want everybody in the chat to see. So select everyone so that everybody can see your chat personally, unless it's a personal message or whatever that you want to send into us directly. There's 2 ways to ask questions. So this is a question and answer session today, although it's on a specific topic. So you can raise your hand, and that will enable you to come live to ask your question directly to myself as today's student teacher. So what will happen is, at a certain point, I'll ask if there's any questions. Harat and Habab, as your facilitator today, will then ask you to unmute your microphone. And so you need to do that so we can give you permission to speak. And then you can ask your question. Obviously, if you've dialed in today, then those options to raise your hand is *9 and *6 when prompted to unmute yourself. Because once we do unmute you, you can unmute yourself and mute yourself at will. We just ask that you keep yourself muted once you've asked your question, as to not disturb the rest of the class with any background noise. The other way to ask a question, if you don't want to come live in terms of speaking, as you can raise your hand and place a question, select this option, and then write the question down in this section. And then once at the appropriate time, I'll ask if there's any questions, then the facilitator will ask that on your behalf. And obviously, if you've got any follow-up questions, just use the same medium there. So if you've got any questions, do not sit there in ignorance, or there's something you don't understand. This is what the question facilities are there for. Ask, do not sit there in ignorance. No poll questions today. You'd be glad to know, or no quizzes today. Some of you will be glad to know, but they are an ongoing feature of the classes, just to ensure that your learning is, or the learning that you're doing is captured. So we will do those, as an ongoing exercise or concern within the future. Okay, so again, some feedback about dipping. This is an issue that we were having earlier. So let me try and just turn the volume up. Just see if that makes any difference. Bear with me 1 second. Just check that and see if that's any better with the sound there. Maybe it's too loud, but we'll see. So who is the master teacher? Dr. Malachi Z York Okran, also known as, to us in this day and time, as Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn, and born to Mary Abba Okran York, known as Fatima Miriam. We always give respect to our sacred feminine, because in nature, feminine is first. It gave birth to masculine and also neutral gender, which is referred to as bathanoid. So that's your hermaphrodites and hermaphrodites. All came from sort of female gender. So we start and give our respect to our feminine side first, and that what obviously carries our mitochondrial line. So the lineage that we that we have, in terms of actual fact of us being connected down the line, is always going to be through the mitochondrial line, you understand, or DNA seed, understood, when we're talking about physicality at least. So Mary Abbott of Cranyork, say born March 10th, 1929, and you can see her here in the attire of the clan mother for our tribe as Sabians and Yamasee Native Americans on that side. That's one aspect of our culture. And yes, this, when she transitioned, this was passed on to her daughter, Kimamtat Mukpataret Atum Araye, as again through the mitochondrial line. And she is one of our ancestors, which we use the term in Sabaik Muslafu, yeah, so one who is ancestor. We'll learn a lot more about that connecting ability today. And say she is the mother of Dr. Malachi Z York Okran, who brought the doctrine or spiritual science of Wu-Sabat to the Nagaru or Negroids in this day and time. And those who are obviously willing to learn and listen and respect the culture. His father was Al-Hadi Abdul Rahman Al-Mahdi, part of the royal family of Sudan. Unfortunately was assassinated in 1970, but set about, as I say, great works in trying to free his people within Afafreye Ka'u or Africa, and so it's descended from a great line. As you can see there, his grandfather Mustafa Ahmad Al-Mahdi of the Sudan, known as the Mahdi, born, say, 1845, we always say this, but a master Karama or spiritualist in that day and time. And one of many, I suppose, I'll say one of few, in fact, in his story at least, who successfully drove the Mukasu, or invading Mukasu, out of the land of Afafreye Ka'u, as is in the great tradition of some of our great pharaohs of the past, when invaders tried to come in and overtake our lands. Yeah, so physical and, as I say, spiritual knowledge and skill and expression. A very powerful individual, a very powerful family line. So they gave birth to the physical body of Dr. Malachi Z York. And as is the style, I suppose, in ancient Egypt, or the proper way of doing things, when we come, or certainly the descendants of those ancient Egyptians found their seed have veered away from what their true nature is and what they're supposed to be doing, according to the natural rules within the environment, then it's necessary to send teachers along, and that vehicle or vessel that our ancestors used in ancient Egypt, they referred to it as, in the proper terminology, was Amun Nabab Arayay Akhata. The ancient Egyptians referred to that being as Thahutwi or Tahuti. Some say in Hindu culture, for example, or Dravidian culture, they use the term avatar. In the Islamic degree, they say Ila Mutajasid. And say it's a vehicle or vessel that our ancestors used to communicate information that we need to know to aid our ascension journey or transformation in this day and time. So to cover the religious degrees, just very quickly, I'm not going to get into too much detail, the early combination when the so-called seven seals, as they referred to it as, is the seven major scriptures, the symbolism of those needed to be broken because our people seemingly wanted religion rather than their true way of life, known as Wu-Sabat, dealing with factual information, and the new spirituality in this day and time. The combination of Isa al-Hadi al-Mahdi and El-Khadir as the etheric entity or being or incarnated ancestor that was here necessary to pass on information, as I say, that we needed to aid us in this day and time and fix basically a lost but now found, but unfortunately broken people, and rebuild them back up again, from the inside out and outside in. So that combination was utilized until around 1996, when a book called The Holy Tablets was produced. And so this was the bridge between religion and reality, understood. And so it was then now time for us, having learned those early degrees of the monotheistic religions, to now move on to learn about our stuff, understood. So coming into the year 2000, the end of the so-called Caucasoid rule for the last 6,000 years, their time was coming to an end, and it was time for us now to learn our culture, our stuff, in readiness, obviously, to take care of the planet once again. Understood? So a new combination to prepare us for the second half an hour, so to speak, was Dr. Malachi Z York and being known as Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn, so considered to be the 19th elder, and at the end of the 4,000 year cycle, the 19th elder occupies the 25th seat, which is on Earth. So that deals with the relationship between outformation and information. So we receive our knowledge from an outformational source, understood, coming into us when we in this planet in the form of information. But obviously one must check this out and seek their own confirmation for it to be factual to them. And so, the famous saying of the master teachers, "Don't believe me, check it out." And that just doesn't just apply to our doctrine. It applies to everything that you do in your life, especially when you're taking in information. So let's get into what we were dealing with today. If there's any questions, please feel free to ask, or go back to some previous parts on our YouTube channel. Let's get to... Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to deal with the was constantly asking about it. So we'll deal with the ancestral connection first, and then we'll come back to where we were dealing with freaks and the perfect creature. So let's see where that is. Okay, before we get into that, I'm not going to cover all of this, but let's just do a little bit of background so we know what we're talking about here. Right, I'll probably recover this, but we are entering into an area, and this is from Master Secret's Ultimate Reality, where basically, obviously, because people might say, well, you all are talking about facts. Now we're stepping into an area where it arguably could be difficult to prove until you get there. Remember, knowing something is after the event. So things that take place, I suppose, after you die, for example, you're not going to know whether it's real until you're dead. You understand? It's the cold reality of the situation. You understand? However, there are clues, and our ancestors, certainly as the Kadem Mukamatu, or the ancient Egyptians, left a lot of symbols for us, a lot of monuments, etc. And obviously one of the key things about symbolism, that it allows us to really help, it protects knowledge away from people who are not supposed to have it, but also it allows us to see, because it allows to see or have some insight, as I say, into what is taking place into the darkness. So obviously a symbol represents something, and if you don't understand what that symbol is, you will be ignorant to it, to some degree. if you do know what it is, then the symbol, obviously what you can see, represents a meaning which is hidden. Understood? And as we discussed in the last class, most of the majority of the environment, in fact, the comparison is not even close. It's not equal, like 50-50. But, most of the environment that we talk about, all expanding, is darkness. Yeah, so we live in a dark environment. We just happen to be in a planet that is facing, a life form. Yes, in the form of the sun, one of our ancestors, which obviously is emitting, vast amounts of energy towards this planet, which we interpret those light particles moving in darkness hitting this planet as daytime. Understood? And then when the planet rotates into a different position, we refer to that falsely in the society as nighttime. The reason why it's false is because the word night really comes from an Old English word. It means the absence of light, and there's no such state. So what it is, that's why I refer to it as shadow time, because the Earth is in a state of shadow. It is not night. Light is not absent in that scenario, just to say we're not facing the sun at that particular time. Now, we talk about a lot of different subjects, and you'll see a lot of people claiming to be this, claiming to be that, etc., descended from this person, incarnated of this, etc., etc., etc. Now, obviously, is it true, not true, or some people claim to have certain experiences, etc., etc. The fact of the matter is that a lot of those things are taking place in the person's head. So that not that I'm cold towards it, or anybody should be cold towards it. But if it's taking place in your head, only you can see it. So you can't expect somebody else to accept what you're saying or be convinced by what you're saying just because you're putting passion into it, or you're trying to convince them of a certain thing that you have seen but nobody else has seen. Understood? So the reality of the situation is that we retain an open mind about a lot of things, because there's many things that take place within the environment that we're not aware of. We're almost going through a process of relearning. Understood? Because what we learned about in this society and what we were taught, I think the term said that everything that we've been taught is a lie. And, the reality is that as you start to certainly study Wu-Sabat, you see that statement is very true. You understand? In many things that have been presented and the way it's been categorized or framed, it's not factual. It's from a certain perspective, but it's not factual. There's a lot more to know. And in the reality, not in all things, I suppose science to some degree does seek to prove things, but it can have its own inherent biases depending on the people who are in there. And even in that field, there have been many people who have shown a level of knowledge and innovation, etc., that wasn't accepted by the mass scientific community until people unfortunately had passed away. So even in those kind of spheres of knowledge, it can be problematic, and certainly most of the accelerated knowledge or findings, they take it back to Rome or to Greek philosophers, scientists in that regard, and that forms the basis. But those Greeks and Romans happened to learn from ancient Africans, though that is an actual fact, and we don't have the African perspective until now, which is in the form of Wu-Sabat, as a spiritual science of the Nagaru Negroid or African in this day and time. Now, the statement you're looking at on the screen shows that in our doctrine, in the Saint Master Secret's Ultimate Reality, verse 138, it says, in Wu-Sabat, we make no such claims, only that we are linked to our Salafu ancestors by our DNA. This is proven, and that we are all Nawat Mukwanu, supreme beings, what they call God, a larger. That is who we are. 139. These are the ultimate facts of Wu-Nawat, Wu-Sabat at 140. Don't believe us, check it out for yourself. So, I say we talk about many subjects, but it's telling you there in 138, the foundation of what we do is that we are stating that we are connected to our ancestors. That's what we are stating. So we might talk about extraterrestrials, might talk about various different subjects, etc., etc. It's just the sound here, kids. Back there with me. These gremlin day-to-day people, maybe because of the subject that we're speaking about today, because some truth that all should know, but not many people use in their daily lives. They're the true and real power of who we are. So the fact of the matter is that we're saying that this is what we claim, that we're linked to our ancestors. So we may speak about many different subjects, and that's not to say they're not true. Obviously, when you encounter it and you confirm it, then obviously it's a fact, or you understand it or know it to be a fact. And this is why it's not a belief thing just because I'm saying it or somebody else is saying it. It's not based on who we are. It's based on you doing your research, checking things out for yourself and seeking confirmation for yourself by asking questions, doing research, etc. But the difference for us in this day and time, I suppose, as Wu-Sabat, is that our frame of reference is Wu-Sabat. Our frame of reference is not European culture or European focused books or knowledge, etc., etc. We have a vast array of knowledge thanks to the work rate, unbelievable work rate of Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn, well over 1,000 books. So we have a vast array of knowledge and information that we're seeking to master. And so therefore our journey insofar as walking that long walk on a short path, meaning to say that we had to absorb a lot of information in a short space of time, means that we say we have our own point of reference that we want to, if we're seeking confirmation, does it confirm itself in Wu-Sabat? Is the switch or change around that we are using for ourselves, which is what all other races do as well, who are not under the spell, let's be honest, of the ghost god of the Caucasians, and therefore who basically the ghost god of the Caucasians is the Caucasians. You understand? So and so therefore people, certain sub-races of them may hear their voice as the authority before they hear anybody else's voice. But in the spell being broken and continuing to break, we see ourselves as the authority. And so we seek an author in our image and after our likeness to determine for us what or what is not authentic. Understood? And there's no reason why in natural nature why we should have to seek that authentication from somebody who doesn't look like us, and certainly somebody who has a history of oppressing our people through wrong racism. And wrong racism, as opposed to right racism, is when you suppress another race to further your own race. Yeah, that's wrong racism. Right racism is racial pride, which is what all races on the planet should be and feel if they're living in the right way, etc., and not causing harm to other races by way of their expression of their culture. So very important, the foundation of who we are is this link. That person is linked to their mother, father's child. Excuse me. They are their mother's and father's child, and then to their grandmother, great-grandmother, so on and so forth, on both sides of the family, making up 4 generations or 30 people. Understood? Yes? So, I said it is Gremlin Day today. For some reason, so maybe it's to say because of what we're teaching today. Let me just see if we can adjust the sound, just because I don't want to mess up people's enjoyment. Okay, coming back. I don't know if that's any better, so you'll have to just give some feedback as to whether that's any better or worse than what you're hearing at the moment. I'm going to move this sound shield as well, see if that works. Okay, right. So let's move through this now. So this is one of our prayers, and we're sort of interested in, and this is called Free Him, yeah. And what we're looking at here is some of the words here. So it says, Yeyu Magdamu Afudnun Amkum Yake Laduda Salafunun U Yasarunun Yake Adir Sawura Pa Ba'h Yake Kawuna Ka'u Yake Adir Ahach Yake Kawuna Basharwu Damam. So here we say, it says, O ancient ones, guard us from you all, from whom birthed our ancestors and our families, from whom are fashioned into soul, from who were spirits, from whom are ether, from whom were flesh and blood. So here we see that who we're referring to, our ancestors, were once in, or considered to have lived in physical form, and are now ether or energy, as we would have it to state today. We obviously are animists in our culture, and so we look up the definition of an animist. That is people who have the viewpoint that they descend from a soul force in the first instance. So we were energy before we incarnated into this physical form. Understood. And this is showing that who we are referring to, our ancestors, have gone through this same ascension journey, hence why they are able to leave a pathway for us to follow in order for us to be able to fill our potential. So we have two terminologies here, Natharu here, which means overseers, and you see the term here, Salafu. So when you're talking about the term Natharu, then really, which means overseers, or translates as overseers, what you are seeing there, if you were to visualize it, because one of the things that they did is they took away the reality of what maybe is described in the West as divinity. Yes, because if you think about who is your mother, for those who know who your mother is, you have an image in your head. You think about who your father, for those who know their father, you have an image, and so on. If you think about and call out various different family members, uncle, brother, your sister, etc., you've got an image in your head. When somebody then says to you, okay, what about God? Allah, Yahweh, the Most High. There's no image. There's no image. You start to think on that. There's no image. So you've gone from this vivid idea of how this connection worked, because you understand that you couldn't be here unless you obviously had a mother and father in some way, shape or form. Yes? So you've gone from this vivid image and vivid idea of that link now to this vague idea of a link based on what you've been taught. Yeah, because they then give you characters who are in between you and this particular deity, even though they claim in their Bible that you're supposed to be in the image and after the likeness of the same divine being. So the question is, if you're in the image and after the likeness, then why is there no vivid image? And that vivid image, let's be honest, has been developed or expressed by certain people of certain races by those who were artists, not factologists. Yeah, or we don't know if they were factologists. Yeah, so a picture on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel by Michelangelo, understood, we're getting his interpretation of what divinity is, and he did it in the image and likeness of his own race. So as we've said before, it seems, or so it seems, is when art masquerades factual information, it can cause a lot of problems for human development. Yeah, because certain images have been seared, let's say, into the subconscious mind of, certainly us as Africans. You can think about the image of a drawing of the character named Jesus, understood, and these various different things. But that doesn't look like you. So you know how those subliminals work. If God or Jesus is white and he's good, and the opposite of Jesus and God is the devil, understood, and the opposite of white is black, then it's telling you who you are in their culture. Yeah, it's telling you who you are. And this is why some of the rules that are supposed to, or laws, let's say, that are supposed to apply in this society to us, they don't. So we're relying sometimes when we're talking about this false kidnapping, so-called kidnapping or slavery, falsely called slavery, I should say, kidnapping of our people. In their mind, it was wholly and fully justified. Yeah, because you're seen as lower than them in their doctrine. And the hallmarks of all of that still feature heavily within their system today. When you go into their so-called law courts, and even in the society today, you're always capable of committing the greatest evil, but never the greatest good. As in the case of the master teacher. If all the charges that they claim against him are true, he would have had to have sex 11,000 times a month to fulfill all the accusations. But when it's a black man on trial, understood, well, how can a human being have sex 11,000 times? They don't say, how can a human being have sex 11,000 times? They say, there's no smoke without fire. That's what they say. Unless the person's of a different color of skin, then all of a sudden they can look at things rationally because the person looks like them. A canine trait, animal trait. Yeah, to simply be in and of or for your own. Now, so we have an issue or a problem when it comes to that. So we never had an image of what the divinity was according to us and our culture. Simply not because it wasn't there, it's because we wasn't looking, and more importantly, we wasn't motivated to find it either. We were happy to accept the multiple choices given to us in this society by the Mukasu mind. Yeah, but now you have to break that down. Well, why am I visualizing my understanding of existence through somebody who my ancestors were here millions, billions of years before? They've only been around for the last 6,000 years. Yeah, and that's not a wrong racial statement. That's fact. So how am I coming to you to perform my rituals? How am I coming to you to interpret my spirituality? But that's what we do, isn't it? We allow them to marry us. We allow them to bury our dead, understood? Knowing that the person doesn't give a damn, you understand? Yeah, about the person who's born, you understand? It's just a ritual to them. You understand? You can see it in their faces if you really watch it. You understand? Not really feeling some things why the person is dead, certainly in this country, and I'll speak for the States. But certainly in this country, you understand, you go to their dead rituals, and they're not even that interested in the death of the person, really feeling it. Read some words or some nonsense from the Bible, or I suppose Quran, whatever the case may be, and this is supposed to have some impact or effect on the spiritual journey of where this individual who has transitioned or passed on is going. And we're going to explore this, as I say, more in that regard. But what specifically are we speaking about here? What we're talking about here is, what is an atharu? So you must have a visual image in your head, the same way you have the image of your mother if you knew them, and any other family members that you knew. And what you've found progressively in this society is that your mind has been brain dirtied, understood, in a way that people are not even focused on the nearness of the divinity which is close to them. Do you understand? So your God, let's keep it factual and keep it real, your God and goddess is your mother and father. Whether they were good people, whether they were bad people or not. When they came together in that moment, and that sperm and ovum came together, which are the true gods of us as obviously human beings, that led to us being, you understand, in terms of being, becoming, became, obviously we became because of that act. Yeah, at least in the physical form. We gained awareness through that birth and growth process. You can't prove anything else other than outside of that. So that is your God and goddess, because without them you wouldn't be here. Yeah, and obviously as you depending on how you were raised, yeah, I suppose the older you get, if you had decent enough parents, I suppose you gain a better appreciation of the job which they did. Now in life, because they're mum, dad, etc., they're always their job title, aren't they, to other people? You don't necessarily always, some people are blessed enough to know them as people. But because they gave birth to you, do you understand what I'm saying? There's that respect, etc., that's there. So you don't always know them as people. You know them as mum, or you know them as dad, etc. You don't necessarily know them as human beings because they came before you. You're not really on their level like that. And as you obviously get older, you may develop a better connection, better understanding. Maybe your parents more see you as a bit more, not so equal, but up on a certain level, because those conversations may get more mature. The connection may get more mature, and the balance changes, isn't it? You may eventually, as their physical weakens, not their mental, but their physical weakens, etc., then you become a carer for them. So understand, obviously, in our life form, that's how that particular cycle works. So we have to understand that is our supreme being. Understood? Yeah, if we're the being, then that's the one above us, because they came before us and they gave us life. Understood? And so the details of that are very, very important for us to understand. What they want you to do is they want you to jump back, understood, 2,000 years to a Jesus, you understand? Or 1,400 years to a Muhammad, or 3,000 years to a character named Moses, and miss out everybody in between. Now, all this arguing about what color was Jesus and all this kind of stuff, the fact of the matter is, in Wu-Sabat and what's pointed out by the master teacher, well, you need to prove that he existed first. But we don't. We jump back the importance and start calling upon names of unproven beings that have existed and ignore the reality right in front of us. And if you had decent parents, maybe you did have decent parents, a lot of sacrifices obviously were made for you to be who you are, and you are still them as they are you. That is the natural order of things, but it's not respected. Meaning to say, when we say respected, to do again, spec is to look at. We didn't re-look at that relationship again with the new insight and understanding, you understand, to know exactly how to look at certain things. We've always judged it against. What happens is that the Disney style family, the Disney style approach, has you looking at your parents a certain way oftentimes, and that you're measuring them against a standard of living or life that some people may have lived that type of life, but many people who came from council estates or in the States projects and different things, or no form of housing, are going through a transition, you understand, to get back that wealth or build wealth, etc., through generations to get us back to where we were following, coming into this particular country. And so respect for one's parents is not a thing just based upon just how they treat you. And obviously if you was abused and different things, that's a separate issue. But I'm talking about the fact of the matter is that position and title has to be respected if we're going back to the rules of natural nature, because the facts are that is how you got here. And there are other agendas that seem to want to diminish and take away the role of women, be it the LGBTQ and other letters, etc. Agenda, which they're being utilised, obviously, for population control. But that's seeming to want to diminish the role of the woman, understood, and get us almost in a religious sense to accept irrealities as fact. So what this is expressing to us now is to remind you that sometimes the simple things, Wu-Sabat, is essentially it's about simplicity although certain things are complex, to get us to relook and accept simple realities. Understood? So that's a long-winded way of saying when we're looking at the Panatharu, they are sons. Yeah? So when you're visualizing Panatharu, they are sons. S-U-N sons. S-O-N son. S-U-N sons. That is an outformation, because outside of this planet, that is the outformation. Understood? That when it comes here, it becomes information. Because we are the terrestrial representation of the sun, having a solar plexus, 6 to 7 inches above the navel. Yeah, so we are the terrestrial representation of the sun. And that's our etheric connection to our higher ancestors. When we talk about our Salafu, then that is making reference to our 4 generational ancestors, i.e. mother and father, grandmother, grandfather on both sides of the family, all the way up to 4 generations. Yeah, so that is our connection. Now, when you call upon the Natharu, if I'm calling upon Hara, who they refer to as Horus, do I know a Hara exists? I don't know. So what's the difference between saying Hara, because somebody's explained to us, well, that's the proper way to say it, versus saying Jesus? Well, if it's just a faith and belief thing, there is no difference. They're exactly the same. However, if I call upon my grandmother and ask her, who's transitioned, and ask her to make the connection to Hara, that's different. Because I do know my grandmother existed, even if I never met her, which in my case I didn't. So, but I do know she existed because I'm here. And my mother's proof that she is here, as your mother is proof that she existed. So that is factual, which goes back to the earlier verse that we read from Ultimate Reality. That is what we can confirm. Yeah, so confirmation is the 8th step, and then 9th is reveal. So once you accept that reality, then we can start to move from there. Understood? So this is showing you, again, just to reiterate or make that plain, that in here, they're expressing in this, or we're expressing in this particular prayer, as it's been given to us and we've been taught, is that basically they were once what we were. And they're also what we are. Understood? But are no longer obviously in the have a flesh and blood, or in that regard. No longer flesh and blood. Yeah, so they're existing as ether. higher energy life forms, our higher ancestors. But the closest for our understanding, yes, they are suns. And you see that expressed all the way through, yes, ancient Egyptian iconography, don't you? Yeah, in terms of when you look at ancestors, they've got a sun above their head, so on and so forth. Yes, we know that there's Salaf or the Haraf or it's gone up my head for a moment. The Safaf, the Safafat, or the symbols that were used for them were 3 flags in Sanford and the Taru. Understood? But they are suns. We know those 3 flags. Again, we're doing a class later in the year, or probably early next year, which is dealing with the mother in existence. We'll go into a lot of the symbolism around that. So here, we see the cover of a Partakro, the decision book, and we see those 3, obviously, several suns. But here we see positioning, I should say, of 3 suns here. A Tum Ray, a Tum position, the sun as it appears to rise. The Tun position, the sun is highest point in the sky, and the Amun position, the sun as it appears to set. So the Atum, Atun, Amun are the positions, and then when the sun is in that position, we then say Atum Raye, or some say Atum Ray, proper pronunciation Raye. Yeah. So Atum Raye, and then the sun's in this position. Okay, Atun Raye, and then you say Amun Raye. So Raye is the sun. Atum or Atun, in this instance, or icon would represent the position. Understood? And here we see another Ramaz or symbol showing the Uktwi, and as I say, the crescent there. Now, why is that necessary or important? Well, those 4 suns, 3 suns, I should say, denote, can be overlaid against the symbolism of the life journey in the physical. Because obviously we're trapped, even in this diagram, in person, places and things. And the 4th point is the mind or the mental. This is what we've been cut off from, and not really having any true thinking again in terms of our independent perception, away from, I suppose, what we've been given to choices or multiple choices within this society. And so one of the ways in which that is changing is that we've been given our own language, not only to communicate with our own ancestral forces with and communicate with each other with, but it allows us to think what may be classified as outside of the box or outside of the information that's trapped within the English language, and I say in nouns as person, place and things. Understood? So learn the language is helping us to expand our thinking. Now, when we look at the how our eyes work, and we've gone over this before, but just as a quick reminder, understood, our eyes or our vision is able to see, in terms of the visible light spectrum, is between 400 to 700 nanometers. So a nanometer is 1/1000th of a meter, understood? And it's measured from the top of the wave to the next tip of the next wave there, understood? Now, this is just to say that you can see here, this is the visible light spectrum, this little small section here out of the electromagnetic spectrum. So there is a lot that is around us, existing within the environment, that we don't see. And as I say, the reason that we don't see it is because our eyes are locked in to a certain wavelength frequency. Now, does it mean that our eyes can't see outside this range? No. But what we've been taught and the way it's been framed, our perception is locked, broadly speaking, within this range. And so this is why you can't see television waves, and this is why on this side you can't see X-rays, for example. Yeah. So there are things within our environment. Just because we can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So we need to understand that in terms of what we are seeing, use our eyes for. The same thing applies with sound. So the normal range of human hearing is between 20 to 20,000 hertz. And again, below 20 hertz, I'm not saying it's difficult for the average human being to hear below 20 hertz, and above 20,000 hertz, again, it's a range that we can't hear. Now, as you can see from the graphics here, these life forms can hear in these ranges. So therefore, their experience of the environment is different to that of a human being. So there are things that they can perceive in and around the environment that we cannot see. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So as we were expressing, there is a lot of existence that, because of the way our senses are wired, we don't experience. Hence why in our books, it used to say, or in some of the older books certainly used to say, read in the back of them, say, read in the front, read with an open mind. Now we know from reading actual fact, reflection and projection that we must read, yes, we must stay open-minded, but we also must read with a controlled mind. And that means to acknowledge the fact of that there are certain adverse forces within the environment that can take control of one's vision and thinking, etc., based on the fact of how we see things and how we take in information. Understood? And so we always have to be conscious of that and put the necessary controls and mechanisms in place to protect ourselves from those who would seek to manipulate our vision, our thoughts, interpretation, etc., in order to cause chaos. So ultimately, they can take control of our soul or energy and have it divert for them to be able to feed off of. So you get an expressed here redefinition of sound, tones and vibrational actual fact. In verse 1, sound relates to you and what we receive from space and beyond. So this is a widening of the definition. It's not just about what is coming through your ears. And so this is part of that transformation or shifting how you see within a language. You can be limited by definitions. Now here, again, if you overlay this against what we were looking at in terms of the diagram or infographic on cover of Partakro, the decision, and again, you see this is representing different, or the electromagnetic spectrum, because the fastest particle, so basically we see colors because you've got particles moving in darkness, and depending on their speed that they're traveling at will determine what color you see. So the fastest on the spectrum will appear, particles moving will appear as blue, and the slowest on the spectrum will appear as red, on the electromagnetic spectrum. Before, as you can see here on both sides, it disappears from sight. So the reason why it gets confusing with the language is because they switch for sight and sound. They swap how these two terms, like infra is used and ultra is used. So basically, when you're saying ultra, isn't it? You're saying beyond, the violet range. So this blue range, which is the last point of vision, they're saying ultraviolet. So that's beyond the violet range, which arguably you can perceive, but you can't see it. And so now certain people can be trained, or maybe naturally hear in the higher octave range, depending on how spiritual they are. They can perceive it, but they're not necessarily always see it in this range. And you can see here infrared. When you're saying infrared, you are saying underneath that range. So maybe they're perceiving this is above, so it's because it's higher, it's faster vibration, and this is lower vibration. Understood? And so therefore, they're saying underneath the visual range. So infrared, so like your remote control or whatever they use in your house to control your TV and other different things. Yeah, that's what is being expressed there. So the point is, as we're saying here, is that you don't need to be ignorant of the darkness. This doctrine is teaching you about the science of certain things, so that you're not ignorant of what's taking place in darkness, because that's where most of existence is. Yeah, they've just happened to have placed more importance on what they are calling the light. Yeah, but much like they diminish the darkness that you know, i.e. the triple darkness in your mother's womb that we came from, and minimize its importance, yes, and give credit. So give credit to the child and not the mother. And you think about even in relationships where people can't have children, you know, do they acknowledge the fact that it's a tri-parent situation in this society? If two gay men, for example, have a child together, sitting there big with their big smiles, showing their gums with their new child, but where's the mother? She's been diminished, you understand, in that situation, being used. Yeah, so we don't accept, okay, well, that's a tri-parent situation to evolve, the understanding of that, the production of that life, and give credit to where it's due. You understand? So we're accepting the reality then. You understand? If we know we've got tri-parent situations, but we're not calling it that. And so accepting irreality again. So here is, as I say, walking us back into this darkness, and that what things exist there, and so that you take your mind, your knowledge, etc., and you're not ignorant of it. As a whole heap of existence and power and energy there that you are connected to, draw from, etc., and most importantly, is real. You understand? Even though from your perception point of view, it may appear non-tangible, but what you're using is your reasoning skills and abilities to know, for example, that if somebody was to write a mathematical sum and they said x equals, very simple, I don't know, let's say you had 5 on one side of the equation and you said 5 equals x plus 3. Yeah, based on the 5, you can work out what x is. Yes? Very simple mathematical equation there. Yeah, 5 equals x plus 3. Yeah, so you can work out what x is based on the result. So in a similar way, if you have understanding of certain species, you can say, okay, right, you've seen this human being, you know, looking at the result, what has come before it. So this is where we use, even though he wasn't present to see all of it take place, the result of it is indicating that something has happened before. So now you're being expressed as you've been taught. When you see a sun, understood? Cool. There are stages that have happened before that sun manifested itself, understood, to become visible in space and time. Yeah, so it had its own birth, so to speak, date, which was obviously beyond our current existence or life as we understand it to be, yes, but it had a birth date. And this is what these things are peering us into, understood, using symbolism and so on, to help us gain some understanding there. So here we see those same colors, yes, being used here from east to west. So that Atun, Amun, and the fourth point, Anun, is used in a lot of our doctrine, and for us to have understanding, because the symbols can mean many things, but we're interested in what it means to us. Understand? And remember, the illusion of this is because we are obviously on the earth looking upwards. We always have to remember that. That aspect of things is also an illusion, because the sun doesn't move, it doesn't pan across the sky. It only appears to do so to us sitting here on earth, but it can be used because of what? That divine design by the Panatharu, certain clues are being left for us, as I say, to understand our ascension journey. Not only who they are, but importantly, who we are in relation to them that came before us. Now, very quick, I'm not going to do this in the very details. I've done it many times in these classes. But here is referred to as the SMAT circle, and as you are aware, it basically describes the evolutionary, or perhaps evolution, not a good word to use, but the growth journey of our species in terms of a race, and other races also, and in how it relates to us as the source of all races on the planet today. And we understand that because we've been taught through ontology, in saying that this circle designed by Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn, designed to inform us of, say, the cycle of existence and how things change within it. Understood? So this is a 72 million year cycle, and it's showing the birth and rebirth of what we would describe as nine ether, and how that energy declines in power, understood, over time, dies. And when nine ether dies, it produces six ether. When six ether dies, it produces ghost, understood? And then there's a resurrection that takes place, or a revolution that takes place, understood? Which is describing the way in which these energies move around the circle, understood? Yeah, so we're seeing here that the that numbers here, if you add up, actually, you add up all the numbers from 1 to 9, calculate that, and obviously think about what it equals. You can do that sum in your own time. You can see it always comes back to the 9. Now, here, that in this particular species, so we're looking at rock formation, describes that journey in some great detail. Understood? So here you see coal. It's black. It's full of energy. Understood? And it's quite what we would say is it's not dense to the touch. It's quite brittle. Understood? Yeah. Coal, but the blackness denotes energy. It's full of energy. Understood? Now, over time and age, coal becomes a diamond. It's a very hard material. Understood? And transparent. Yeah, and the important thing about that transparent is that it's lost its energy over time. Now, obviously, in this society, they place value on, not that which is strong. They place value on that which is weak, devoid of energy. And so this represents energy. This represents devoid of energy. Because those colors, the various different colors, they represent states or vibrations of energy, isn't it? At different speeds or tiers, power levels, so on and so forth. And so you add all those colors together, what do they make? They make blackness, which is not a color, it's a tone. White is not a color, it is also a tone. And it represents that loss of energy. But in our fake society, this is what has the value, isn't it? Saying this doesn't have value, but you couldn't basically pay your mortgage off with this. Someone gives you one of these, you're mortgage free. Yeah, so the reality of the situation is that they have gone against Natharu, they've gone against nature, and made that which is genetically inferior feel like it is superior through brainwashing, and that which is genetically superior, they've made it feel inferior, or them feel inferior through brain dirtying. Understood? So there is a difference in the way in which we move around the circle, which represents revolution versus evolution. Evolution represents decay, revolution represents strength, decay, and then back to strength again. So not all races move around the circle in the same direction. And so you have to understand the ontology of this, which other races seem to know, or their religion that makes them feel like they are the top guy, the top woman, or whatever, because not so much maybe women, but the top man, because their deity and their prophets look like them, or they feel that they look like them. Excuse me. Yeah. And so that confidence and their ability for them to work with each other comes from that doctrine that is being designed and works best for them, which is why obviously we appear powerlessly spiritually, because that doctrine, or those doctrines, those foreign doctrines, they don't work for us because they was never designed to optimize us. Understood? So you have to understand the differences between, or as we say, who's who on the planet Earth, and understand the relationship between that and energy. Beings have lived many millions of years before we have. Now, I won't get into this particularly too much, but you obviously understand that as a species, we start off weak. Yes, when we come straight out the womb, living in that water environment, and so we start off with fur, isn't it? And as we are brought into the environment, we feel the energy of our ancestors connecting with us by way of the sun. Yes, we start to get stronger, or adapt to this environment that we're in now, what we call planet Earth, etc., or Ba'h Yaanuwn. We adapt to the planet, and so we become darker in skin. Yes, we become much more energetic, become much more powerful due to the obviously pigmentation in our skin, which plays a part all the way through our growth process. You see here these two beautiful deities, supreme beings that we see here, and importantly, that fur, as we become stronger, yes, it becomes hair. So the hair in the body, it starts to tighten up, isn't it, as we become stronger, because it denotes genetic strength. Yeah, the tightness of the curl denotes genetic strength, and that's as we become darker as well. Some people, the child's born because of the programming, they're happy that they got a red-skinned child, straight out the womb or whatever. Yeah, but that child is gonna blacken up. Understood? It's going to become stronger, and so it's more energy there, more hue. Now, in our species, we have 9 different species of Negroid or Nagaru, and that represents, we have 9 hues. And so, obviously, you see the word human, because one of the sort of meanings around that is because of different hues. Understood? Yeah, in human, but it also ties into the Egyptian deity of the creative force of will. So this relationship here between us and energy, again, is there. Now, the hair or the tightening of the curl, remember, is a result of activity taking place within the genes. And more importantly, what was inherently in the recipe that produced, these two lovely human beings. Yeah, so in the recipe, was energy in there. Yes, energy in there that then meant that basically hair was going to arise from that original recipe. And so the full amount of energy was in there. Yeah, just what that 9 represents on the circle. Yeah. So here, for example, yes, the 9, which represents all energy existing in all places everywhere, is 9 ether. Yeah, and grows old, it dies, it becomes 6 ether. So that is 1/3 less in the recipe. 1/3 less in the recipe. So when that energy from its gaseous state or whatever, manifests itself in terms of the human species. Then what do we get? We get a black man or woman, with straight fur, i.e. the Dravidian. Because there's 1/3 less in the recipe. When you get 2/3 less in the recipe, what do we get? We get transparency. So the last point of the human species. So the death of 6 ether is ghost. Some say 3 ether. Understood? So just very quick running through understanding the circle. Now I'm going to cover this because we're going to move from where we need to go. But you see these forces referenced obviously in their religion today, and we need to be obviously on the right side of this, because the forces of 6 ether must subsist, must subsist off of others, particularly the force of death and decay, in order to become powerful. That's what they feed off of. You understand? And so no more better way to feed off of than the energy that exists here, isn't it? It's the most powerful source of energy, 9 ether. Understand? So if we can shift 9 ether into death, what's it going to do? It's going to empower 6 ether forces. So hence why the symbols that are being used represent death, versus the others is opposite, so to speak, that represents life. Opposite doesn't mean equal. Remember we talked to you last class about 90% darkness in existence versus 10% of light, which is chaos. So they're opposite, but they're not equal. Yes, light exists in darkness. Darkness does not exist in light. You know light because of darkness. In this society, yes, it's all about the light, isn't it? Enlightened. If you know knowledge, you're enlightened. And the blackness is made to appear negative or evil, so on and so forth. You know the details around that. Now, the important thing about that circle that we were looking at is this part here, yes, because effectively, where we have found ourselves as a people, ignorant of all of this, didn't know nothing about it, forgot all the stuff that we once knew, and it was washed away from our minds, so to speak. And so therefore, the forces of evolution, 6 ether, obviously continually seek to reverse the circle and move it in a what? Clockwise direction, as opposed to anti-clockwise. Which is what we see more in natural time, so at least as it appears to be, because the sun pans from the Atum-Re point, isn't it, to the Amun-Re point. So it moves, if you complete the circle, it moves anti-clockwise. It doesn't move in a clockwise direction. So the forces of evolution, which is seeking to death and decay, want to move that circle in the opposite direction. So this is symbolism here, but obviously being expressed graphically, ontologically, so we can see or get a better understanding of what is going on. So here, when you start to deal with 0, 1 and 2, for example, so that's below below 3 ether on ghostational forces, you're dealing with non-carnate entities. Non-carnate entities, so spirit beings, so on and so forth, that don't have a physical body. Say non-carnate, they don't have a physical body. Now, how are they brought up into the physical world to have power to be able to change a circle? So it's an interesting point of view or perspective to understand this. Well, they are brought in or have the ability to enter into the world, or one of the ways in which it happens is by human beings desires. Yeah, so simply by a person saying, I wish, I desire this or that, so on and so forth. Yes. When a person uses that language, because all thoughts, all words, etc., you understand, words are simply thoughts, you understand? So when a person is saying, I wish, I want, understand, or using these terms, or so not want, wish, understand, or words like hope, yeah, abstract. What it does, it opens the person up, yeah, to become wanted. I mean, what can be used in that category as well. I think about it can be used as well. So what it does, it opens the person up, and so therefore, any force, yeah, or spirit, understand, can be attracted to fulfill that want or desire because the person's opened themselves up. And so the desires can draw beings to bring them from non-carnate into the carnate being, seeking then to fulfill that desire because the person's opened themselves up and therefore left themselves open to fulfill for something or a thing, say rather than something, a thing to fulfill that request. And so through our desires, we draw these entities in from the lower cipher or Lucifer, yeah, so lower cipher, the lower circle or Lucifer, yes, into the real world. Now, this is interesting enough. As I say, you have to watch a film called Devil's Advocate. I haven't get into all of that, but Al Pacino as the devil. He gives a speech at the end. And if you listen to that speech, this makes a bit more sense because what they're saying is, look, the trick is you juice up human beings so they're full of all these desires, wants, needs, etc., which obviously is creating stress in their lives, living up to be like the Joneses or whatever the terminology is, meaning to say, I've got to keep up with my neighbor, keep up with the latest this or that, etc. Of a sudden, it feels like it has some kind of importance. And in that speech, he says, well, all the while they're doing that, who's taking care of the planet? So while human beings are engrossing themselves in all these different things, Louis Vuitton and blah, 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 etc., yeah, it kind of, I'm saying, well, so it's called fake, which have fake importance, fake meaning, yeah. The planet, they're destroying the planet, or the planet's being destroyed and nobody's looking after it. You understand? So it's a strategy, basically, that is being used because I suppose if you strip away, I'm not saying you shouldn't have nice things and that kind of stuff, but how important is it really? But how many things sit in the desire category versus straight up need or essential category? Yeah, and have we created what they say, a rod for our own back? You understand? By being filled with all these different desires, which is, you know, taking up our time and things in life, I suppose, that we have to maintain, and therefore that is at the expense of the real, as I said, etheric or spiritual growth. Now you can't be devoid of one and not the other. Some people talk about more spiritual. You have to be both, isn't it? 360 miles to the physical, 360 miles for the spiritual to be 720. So you can't. So you got to master the physical in order to be to master your spiritual. Because if you're hungry in your belly, it's difficult to understand. Do your various different spiritual exercise, read, and so on and so forth. If you've got certain things you need to take care of, responsibilities for family, etc., you can't concentrate properly. So obviously, most of our problems will be solved by a decent regular income. So that is the straight reality of where we're at. But this desires, obviously, designed to move the circle in a different direction, which really, if you think about it, a lot of things in this society are based on self-destructive behavior as opposed to self-preserving behavior. And this is two different routes or paths at work here. Understand? One, obviously, draconian, reptilian, and the other one was more taught by Skian representatives by way of the Mamadu, the Greys, teaching a different self-preservation from our ancestors as opposed to self-destruction. And we see that prevalent in the lives we live today, don't we? Insofar as a person having their birthday or a celebration, excuse me, yeah, we have been caught in a mindset that says, yes, if I'm celebrating, what that means is I get to be allowed to destroy my body for one day or however long the celebration lasts, isn't it? That's what it means, really. If you strip away, yeah, what takes place, yes? So I can go out in the nightclub, whatever, and because it's my birthday, I can drink more than we would usually drink. It's my birthday. I can potentially, you understand, have some fun, whatever, sexually, maybe be a bit more loose on that day because it's my birthday. We're celebrating. Yeah, we can eat more than what we usually eat because we're celebrating. We can eat bad foods on that day because we're what? We're celebrating. Yeah, so the society has us wired, yeah, in a way of celebrate means we get to self-destruct more on that day than we would do normally. Understood? So if we start stripping back and thinking, man, start thinking about some of the things that we're doing, and it sounds like, look, we're living some monk's life. I'm not saying we're doing that. And I'm not saying that, you know, whatever, a tub of Haagen-Dazs Bailey's ice cream doesn't taste nice. I'm not saying that. I'm saying obviously it does, but it's going to mess up your body afterwards. Certainly for people who are lactose intolerant. You understood? So fun is associated with self-destruction. Yeah, unless you sort of try to seek to change that arc and vibration to something different. They're approaching whatever, Christmas or what they call it. Yeah, Kris Kringle, the mighty Kris Kringle's holiday. Yeah, where the elves are going to be making frantically at work, making toys for all the good children around the world. Understood? And so this is going to be a time of what? Basically, self-destructive behavior, isn't it? Yeah. So this is how it's done. You understand? And well, we're just having fun. When you try and do something different, yeah, it appears that you're not having fun. Understood? Yes. When you switch that word and say enough or enough of this, you understand? Yeah. But it appears we're not having fun. So all of this is reversing that circle round to a different direction to go clockwise. Yeah, as opposed to the previous direction of anti-clockwise. So here it's showing you more detail, yes, how the society is framed, yeah, to bring, yeah, or help. Because these discarnate entities or energy, that word demon, if you think about if it's still related to the kind of cosmology, because it's short for the word dead moon, yes, which is opposite of the what? Sun. Yeah, because the moon doesn't have any light; it only gets its light from the sun. Yeah, so these demons or dead moon, in terms of describing energy, yeah, or etheric energy here. Yeah, obviously, as in not in a carnal body, they can't fulfill their desires. So, of course, they would want to in-house beings who do have a carnal body or a vessel to be able to take over that vessel or body in order to fulfill those desires. Imagine being thirsty and you do not have hands or a body to, you know what I mean, operate the tap or whatever, or twist the cap on a bottle of water and drink. Think about the feeling of thirst, or the desire of being thirsty. We know, break it down. It's a chemical reaction, a hormonal reaction in the body. You know, a person thirsty can also indicate a person's actually hungry. Yeah, but it's a feeling, isn't it? Now imagine you're not able to fulfill that by drinking a glass of water that puts the fire of desire out. How long is that gonna? It's gonna keep escalating, isn't it? Exponentially. Yeah. So on day hour 1, I think, and so boom, 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 boom. It's gonna keep escalating. Now, obviously, through fasting and meditation, some people can prolong and manage that process for quite some time. You understand? But it's still going to grow. It's still going to be there. The sound has a need to fulfill. So this is what happens, isn't it? Okay, plague the human beings here with these desires, so they can pull up these forces out of the lower cipher or Lucifer, and say, helping to reverse the circle to more self-destructive behavior. Understood? And what you see here of how it changed, yes, was because what? The forces of nature, or the feminine forces of nature, yeah, are producing what? Or reintroducing the knowledge of 9 ether, or outformation is coming in, isn't it? It has to be outside because they had the society on lock. Yeah, no one knew outside of their little matrix, because all the options are within their matrix. You think about all the options, even in those early schools of religion. Okay, we've got a black Muslim organization, Nation of Islam. We've got black organization, but it's still within the tones of the multiple choices. Until now, in this day and time, where the force of 9 ether now are ready to take control, because the 9 is meeting the 6, isn't it? In the 4th 24,000 year cycle, you add up the 4 24,000, isn't it? Equals 96. So the 9 and the 6 verse each other 96,000 years down the line. They verse each other. So they clash. And so that outformation is coming in now, because I'm reversing the behavior, because you're becoming more aware now as a people. And then what does that knowledge do? When somebody points it out, you start to do things differently. You start to make different decisions. Now, I'm not saying it's easy, you know what I mean? Because you've lived in a world where you did eat pork, some of you. Yeah, so you know what it tastes like. Just some of you don't do it anymore. Hopefully, and you don't do it anymore. You stop doing it. Now you know. So their plan, the energy that would have us eating pork, yeah, so we become more like food for the gods. Yeah, we're seasoning and conditioning our own bodies to taste like what they like. If we we can tell that energy. No, we're not giving any energy to that plan again, because we stop doing it. And now when we start to do stuff that's in our image, after our likeness, progresses our culture, it reverses the energy within the circle, because it's seeking to go this way. They're trying to cause it to go the other way, which they had a little control, let's be honest, for the last 6,000 years. Yeah. So we cut off life to these lower entities. Yeah, by not or minimizing or reducing what we're giving, you understand, to their society. Hence why it says, come out of her, my people. Hence why it says separate. because it's where your energy is being diverted to. Now, if you really understand this properly and understand that only true people with real energy are those with soul, then it's all about the diversion game. Yeah, some people are living in houses and stealing their neighbors' electricity without them knowing. And this is what's happening with religion. Yeah, your energy is being diverted to feed forces that are designed to work against you. Yeah, so everything you do in terms of even just your individual changes in behavior, you have to understand, yes, I'm reversing the cycle. It's not down to a leader or a messiah, do you understand, in that regard. You are those things, or you're higher than those things. You're being called a supreme being, and a wet mukwan. Supreme being has power, correct? What is the power? Well, the power is to make the choices that are energy full, yeah, and directing that energy to the right place, as opposed to energy depleting, which puts that energy to the wrong place. Because nature's abundant, isn't it? Yeah, nature's abundant. Yeah, 777,700 sperm, yeah, in a healthy man's ejaculation. One is needed to get the job done. Maybe two. In case of twins, so on and so forth. You understand? So the fact of the matter is abundant. It's more than what we need, not less. Yeah, so this is how we have to start to think. And well, why is all this ancestry important? Well, by way of a very simple thing, which we've said in these classes before, yes, which is that as a supreme being, yeah, or as they call God, you cannot be in need and still be a supreme being. Because the moment that you are in need, you are no longer a supreme being. Yeah, because by placing you in need, what does that do? It opens me up to becoming a wanted, a person who has to have, or even worse than a wanted, because it's no longer desire. I'm in need now. Now, any force or source can fulfill that need. We see that prevalent in how Africa is today, isn't it? How it's manipulated. They're obviously waking up now, do you understand? But it's still, it's the richest part of the planet. Yeah? Has the mineral wealth beyond what we would even conceive and believe. Yeah, it's trapped. Not all, but predominantly, many countries there, trapped in a state of poverty. And so, because they can't go and exploit that mineral wealth, because seemingly they don't seem to have the technology to exploit that mineral wealth for themselves, what happens? They bring in Western companies, or now in the case of China, Eastern companies, to come in and do the work for them. And if they're able to hit up an individual, yeah, maybe make them wealthy and rich or whatever, maybe that person doesn't look out for the best interest or the best deal for the country. Or maybe because they're that powerful that the person who seemingly has the money calls the shots, as they say, isn't it? Yeah, so imagine, in the case of certain time in China, they're building large infrastructure projects and not using those infrastructure projects to transform the lives of the indigenous people of that country. They're bringing in their own labor in certain instances to do the work. It's not a fair deal, is it? It's exploitation. Which who do they learn that best from? Their deities. So there's the situation. If you find yourself in need, then you sometimes you're not calling the shots. You're subject to the person or thing or force or source that is delivering the solution. That's why religion wasn't necessarily, well, it was enforced in part by the sword, but it was also enforced by another means, isn't it? This person's coming with food, put them in a state where they think they need things that they don't have. So I place them in need. Then I come along and now service that need, yeah, as a savior type. But instead of just giving them the food that they need or medicine or whatever, I give them food in one hand, medicine in one hand, and Bible, everything else, and the white Jesus in the other hand. Yeah, and if I can keep you in that state of need, then I have control over you. So this is why they never wanted you to learn who your real ancestors are. Maybe why we get in all these problems with the feed today is because they don't want you to know that science. Because whenever you're in need, they want you to come to them. Think about it in society. When you need the money, they won't lend it to you. Go to the bank when you're in debt, and loads and loads of debt. Will they give you that money? Or will you stand a better chance of getting the money when you are not in debt? When you're in debt, you need the money to pay off the person so you're not in debt. You understand? Yeah, but if you've got the money, you can get more money.
Sorry to interrupt, Nabab Kaknihes. It's heading for 4 o'clock.
Okay, I told that. Yeah, so when you don't have it, you can't get it. Or if they are going to give it to you, the interest rate is going to make you pay, isn't it? If you're poor, you pay more. That's how they have it in this society. You're poor, you pay more. You're rich, and you've already got it, you pay less. Crazy system. Yeah, crazy system we have in place. So they want to keep you in need of them. And so hence why their God was interested in only, I'm a jealous God. Do not put any other God above me. But the God was really the Mukasu. In England, it's the same in the US, but they teach miscegenation behind the back door. Marry in and you'll be successful. Marry us. Understand? They hate you, but yet want you to marry them. They hate you, but they want us to marry for success. Now they promote it all the time in England. So I don't think it's the same in the States, but in the heart of the beast, they promote it all the time. I was saying this the other day. 30% of the football is the main sport in England. 30% of the league is black players. Understand? I haven't seen in my lifetime, and there's probably some English people on the call, I've never seen a black presenter of a football sports show yet. I haven't seen it in my lifetime. I've not seen it yet. And I had a mixed race girl the other day. I'm not saying she's not black. Sad, she is black, but that was the first time in 2021. I've never seen a black male present a sports show, football sports show in England in my lifetime. It's how deep this thing runs. Remember, we have a system in here where if you don't pay, all TVs are licensed. And so it's supposed to be. You don't pay the license, and one day it's put you in prison. There's no commercial imperative. They can show what they want on TV because everybody's paying for it anyway. And they still don't do the right things. Or fair things, or equal things. Let's not say right, but equal things. Equitable things. Just things. Even when the circumstances are there, but there's no excuses not to do. There's no risk, as they say. Now, what does all this mean? Well, what it effectively means is that we have been limping in the Olympics. Yes, because there's a source and a force of energy that we were not tapping into. Yes, because in the symbolism of these 4 stars, yes, was the life journey. Yeah, and the fact that we were alluding to that life after death was provable. You understand? The life after death was provable. Because here we were saying, okay, boom, this is life, living, you understand? And then we have a state referred to as lived. Yeah, so life, living, lived. So when a person, let's say the physical expires, let's just think about it just on a practical level. Yeah, so you're born. Yeah, started off in the darkness. Yeah, boom, boom, in the womb, in the darkness. Boom, now I'm visible. I've been born. Everybody can see me. Yeah, but I had a start before, that you couldn't see me. Yeah, called inception into conception. And then I'm born. Everybody can see me now. Life. Yeah, because I took my first breath. The burning starts. Yeah. In through the nose, out through the mouth, doing proper breathing. Yeah. Fire up the solar plexus. So that burning process starts. Life, living, lived. Now, when a person dies, yes, are they wiped from existence? So their physical body dies. Yeah. So the breathing stops. Take your last breath. So that burning process stops. Life is a burning. Yeah, through the breath. The burning stops. Body goes cold. We were born, yes, black, different hues of black. And when the burning stops, body goes what? Cold again. Almost becomes pale. Yeah, colorless. Yeah, because the burning has stopped. Now, let's say when that burning stops, so they say we died, which is say, okay, we don't exist anymore. Does that wipe you from the memories of all the people that you met in life? No, it does not. The same way, like I suppose when you delete something from your computer, whilst it's not in the immediate memory, it's still there. Hence why it can be recovered. And using the right type of software. So all the people that you touch, trouble, good or bad, etc., in their lives, the moment you die, you're not wiped from the memories of everybody you ever met in life, or who knew you, who knew your name, so on and so forth, depending on how you affected the environment that you were in and around. Even in fact, you're still not dead, because the residual energy in your body can last up to 1,000 years. So you're still not wiped out, even when you stop breathing or you transition. Understood? So what you were before that was built around the physical, understood? Obviously the physical body has expired. But what you were before, potentially, is something still there, or thing still there. Because what we're seeing here in the symbolism is that a tun has a point, isn't it? Or a counterpart called a nun. Which, if we think about the journey of the sun, when we started, we couldn't see. We wasn't able to see Inception. Not the movie, I'm talking about the act. Understand? Could we see conception? By modern technology, no. but we had power to drive those processes. But at a certain point, yes, a few days after, whatever, you can use technology or whatever to detect whether conception has taken place. So all of this time, you were energy, and something was growing, and DNA, RNA, cells, etc. All this started to multiply. The growth process started. Understood? All starting from a mental place first, and then you eventually became detectable in space and time. You already were detectable here. You understand, at conception, but now, what they call the fake time, whatever, started when you were born. So we're holding something, understood, that basically is part of that process, understood, but it was there before what we call life. Do you understand what I'm saying? That energy was there before life, as we know it, started. When I say life, I'm talking about being birthed into the physical. So that energy there, when the physical dies, that energy is still there, residual. You understand? But in this case, cannot be seen, but it can be perceived. Hence, when you think about the sun, and we look at that journey, symbolically, Panatharu obviously opened our eyes to this element of the design. You see the sun, through these various different stages. Excuse me. You cannot see the sun in the shadow hours, but you can feel it. What is the soul? It's the emotional you, isn't it? It's energy, emotion. So you can feel it, but you can't see it, or you can perceive it, I should say, but you can't see it. So when we look at this journey and see that, okay, boom, this is the life journey, and then what's this journey? Which the Egyptians referred to as the duat, or the journey into the underworld, as they might classify it as. So there's a counter journey even to the life one, understood, which may give an inkling, understood, that when they split that hydrogen atom, found out, well, actually, the first stage of existence is not hydrogen, and that the first sum, a lot of some things, breaks down to the world of things, that there are finite forms of energy that exist. Well, you proved that there was a spiritual world. And for us, what the Safaf and various clues that our ancestors left point to is a firm view that there is life after death, or existence after death, or life after life. You understand? Some may classify it as more correctly. Understand? Not life as the burning, understood, but the energy that was there, that the skin suit was built around, has an opportunity to exist afterwards, like it exists in everybody's heads who knew the person. Understood? It doesn't get wiped out when the physical body dies. All of these things point to that the world of things, which we obviously came from before we became physical, does exist. And even when your parents or transition or die, unfortunately, and other ancestors when you're 30 die, they exist within you. This is fact. Actual facts. More provable, more known than a Jesus, a Muhammad, or a Moses, or God himself, or Allah himself, or Yahweh himself, or any other titles and names that they want to use. Actual facts. So they want to make you nervous about tapping in to the source that gave birth to energy and what we're calling power or real power. If I gave birth to energy, that must be more powerful than energy. If I gave birth to power, it must be more powerful than power. That is in the darkness. It is not found in the light. Look at the sun, tremendously powerful. 550 million tons. The sun, hydrogen, 554 million tons of helium every second. The Earth, just in our sun, fits into the planet Earth, fits into the sun 1.2 million times. But our sun was birthed out of darkness. It was birthed out of the world of things. So how powerful is the darkness? So why are we not tapping into it? Because the white man said the darkness is bad. Things that you cannot see are bad. Actual fact says differently. He says, no, study your eyes, study your retina, look at the cells, look at the ratio of the rods versus the cones. Rods are designed to help you see better in darkness. You are designed for darkness, not for light, which is chaos. We are designed for darkness. But we don't exploit the darkness. We don't use the darkness. Because somebody made us afraid of the dark. Because they couldn't see well in the dark. That's not my fault. Go and speak to your God about that. So because you're the sore loser, you want to poison everybody else's mind to be afraid of the darkness. On your road to destruction. If you can't have it, no one can. Anyway, let's get into the real, what they didn't really want us to teach you all today. So, we'll read some important information from Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn. It says, our biggest mistake is that we try to bypass our own ancestors, the Sabu, it means relatives, yeah, and Salafu ancestors, who went straight to Panatharu. Until you acknowledge your own ancestors, Nasabu, Salafu, Panatharu are not real to you. Just explained this earlier, correct? They're not real to you. There's a hierarchy, use that word loosely, or a systematic approach that you have to respect and follow. It's not about like and dislike, it's just about the reality of what is. You start by acknowledging the first point of existence. Once you connect, then you have a direct connect. Once you connect, then you have a direct connection to Panatharu. Your ancestors, the Sabu/Shalafu, will help you make the connection. Seriously powerful words. Yeah, very powerful, but simple. Simplicity in there, but been made complicated in this world. And remember, we were talking about last class, I think it was, about those words, those interesting words, isn't it? Accept and trust. Acceptance and trust. Let's see what else is in this thing here. Fine. Sorry, people, 1 second. Let's get to where it's supposed to be. Ah. Interesting. Seems to work. Bear with me 1 second. I'm just going to change something on the setting here. Bear with me 1 second. So that acceptance of that reality, well, I'm just loading this. So that acceptance of that reality is very important because, as I say, you know, Wu-Sabat is not dealing with faith and belief. Understood? So this acceptance of our first point existence, as we talked about, the acceptance that women were here before men, etc., is us starting to accept certain realities, which are important for us, as I say, to acknowledge. Sensations. Access that part there. Oops. Interesting place. Be 1 second, baby. Apologies. Okay, right. We need to. Hopefully everybody can see the screen. Hope everybody can see the screen. So, thinking about that message that the master teacher expressed about our first point in reality and where our energy needs to start to be directed, so that basically we utilize our Salafu, so our ancestors within our 30, understood? So our DNA ancestors. We utilize them to make a connection, and once it is there, it is established. Understood? Now, in order to connect with our ancestors, because of the ignorant state we're in, we need ritualistic help. Understood? And so this is an example, not you. What it's showing is the things that you basically need to establish an altar. Understood? So table, understood, yes. White tablecloth here with a white candle on it. And you can put things on this so that your ancestors liked, etc. Understood? And we use sage. So here you can see a sage smudge there, a white sage smudge, to ward off, as I say, energy. But as it says, don't burn too much. Send one around you, take it in that sense. But also, you can obviously or ancestors trying to connect with tools. So you want to make sure that the environment is pure. Obviously, when you're approaching these situations, like with anything that you are doing, make sure it's respectful. You're not walking up into these places, saying in your underpants, or you just woke up or whatever, mat in your eye, and you're still in your dressing gown or whatever, trying to engage in these rituals. Make sure you're clean, understood, presentable, be respectful. Doesn't matter just because it's family, etc. Be presentable, like you would be in physical life, understood. Same way, or even more, take even more care, understood, when you do something. Now it says here, place a picture of all your ancestors who transitioned that you're able to find on the altar, and when you are ready to communicate, lay down the pictures of the other relatives and focus on the one that you wish to communicate. So in this example, we can see pictures of 3 ancestors. They're all down. Remember, the one that you want to communicate, you're then going to raise that picture, show that picture. So don't have all of them show. Obviously, if you're not participating in the ritual, you might have it up. That's your personal preference. But when you're engaged in the ritual, you have the other ones down, and you put the one that you want to speak to up, so it acts as a point of focus. Understood? Yeah. So just remember these pointers that you're being given. Follow them to the letter. Now, some things that are interesting for us to know. Yeah. So, if we do not equate to our immediate ancestors, we become lost souls when we translate. So, it's about us establishing a connection while we're alive. Remember, we are both etheric, spiritual, and physical. They are etheric. So, type of spiritual. Yeah, so we are both things. Therefore, it is easier for us to make the connection. Now, some of us are vibrating on such a low level, or not just because of behavior, just purely out of ignorance. And so if they're trying to get a message to us, it can be difficult for us to receive it because of the way we've been taught in this society. Our minds may be closed and not open to that type of communication, you understand? And it's difficult to affect things in the physical world because you're not tangible anymore, so far as you don't have a carnate body. Understood? Yes, so, and as Master expressed on a very old class, we haven't learned to incarnate spiritual beings using our senses the way we do physical things. Understood? So we're not trained to see that world, even though it's in and around us, not been trained to see it, understood? So it makes it difficult for them to see. Now, obviously, knowing about it is the first step, and learning about it is the first stages, because you're aware now. Yes, and so our ancestors, midway through, even if not before, midway through our lives, they were focusing on the next transitions phase. And so they started to think about where we're going, stood partway through their life and prepare for it accordingly. Yes, like it was. So that again is you can call it belief, you can call it viewpoint, call it opinion, but as I say, they arced this life to prepare them for the next one. And as we've seen in Feeding the Forces, actual fact expresses that our ancestors, because where the darkness is eternal, they say they see this as death and where they are as life. Excuse me. Because when a person is born, they are destined to what? Die. Are there any questions? Sorry, Harai. Talking.
Yes, there are some questions. The first question is from Anonymous. When you get a chance to, not right now, can you let us know what is beyond Mu, Ma, and me? Spirits are on the other side of things and are beyond our physical senses, but right there with us. Why do they hang around us? Why don't they move on? Are there spiritual colors like ultra and infra?
So when you say why they hang around us, remember, excuse me, it's not a case that they're, I suppose, hanging around us. The environment where they are, the environment where they are is their environment. Understood? Now, for a certain part of their existence, they are still linked to the planet. And so certain aspects of this particular planet is surrounded by what we would call vast geometric etheric fields that many of our ancestors reside within. Understand? So for where they're at, for the time before they move on to other places, this is equally home to them as we would consider to be home. Do you understand? It just obviously from a dimensional point of view, remember, many things of different vibration can exist or coexist alongside each other. And even that's how universes, obviously, as you are aware, are set up. When that original Big Bang happens, 8 different tones are created as your do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, and that basically creates 8 different worlds, even in one universe. You understand? Coexist alongside each other. Each one of those 8 worlds subdivides into 8 different dimensions. So you have beings of different types, carnal, non-carnal, existing alongside each other. Now, some spiritual entities here are trapped here because of their desires, understand, and low vibration rate. So remember, desires is energy, and as a form of attraction. So some people are trapped here, or entities are trapped here when they transition or pass on because of that. Understand? They were too material, understood? And then you've got the Mukasu, who are truly Mukasu, who don't have the ability or apparatus to ascend outside of this environment, and so therefore are also trapped here. You understand? So you had beings that have traveled here. You understand? That's another thing. Certain gateways being opened, particularly the one that opens at 3 a.m. every morning. It allows beings to come in to this particular dimension or realm. You have events that take place which can artificially open gateways, such as the Hadron Collider project, which can break the fabric between space and time and allow beings to come through who are not supposed to come through, and can also be trapped here. So there are various ways in which what you classify as spirit beings can be in and around the environment. Understood? Why are they attracted to people? Well, simply because you are carnal. You have a vehicle and a vessel that, if you are sufficiently opened up, you do not have the certain controls in place, overly angry, consumption of too much alcohol, drugs, so you're not in control, for example, then these beings basically can in-house you and then get to use your body for a set period, even if it's only for a moment, to experience the physical. Think about something or some entity that is full of desires that they can't fulfill. We've seen somebody who succumb to drugs and their deterioration, for example, what they would do just to get that next fix. What would that feel like for somebody who's looking just to get that next desire hit? Understood? So it's interesting, as I say, that if you think about so there are forces there that prey on and feed off of death, and so will exploit human beings if they are able to cause death, because the energy that gets released, particularly for people who die in an innocent situation, helps to feed and release what has been described as 6 Eden energy that they feed off of. Hence, they talk about in the Islamic degree a mythological creature referred to as a jinn, correct? Which is supposed to be some spiritual devil, but then you have a drink, yes, referred to as what? Also called jinn. Talk about alcohol, they refer to it as spirits, because it lowers the controls, obviously, of a human being to being housed by spirits. Yeah? Consumption of alcohol. Old pubs in England where people drink alcohol, and the old name for them was called gin mills. They were called pubs, public houses. Yes? So it sets the person up to being housed by beings. What happens? They get into Friday night, Saturday night, people go out drinking, boom, 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 boom. What happens? They get into arguments, someone gets stabbed, killed, injured, etc., etc. And the person wakes from their drunkenness or whatever, they can't remember what happened. Understood? So there are always things in the environment waiting to prey upon human beings who are in the environment. Hence why we say, if you pray the wrong way, you become prey. P-R-E-Y. Understood? But yes, we have ancestors also in the environment who are also waiting to transition to the next level, and what can help them is our energy being directed to help them transition on that ascent, so to speak, or getting further energy to make the transition to other world environments, whatever they choose to do next. Any other questions?
Yes, we have a question from Corinne. When we transition, should we go to the dark then, or go to the light?
Well, if you've done what you need to do, as this next verse is indicating, our ancestors will be waiting there to guide you. You understand? So, hopefully, if you have done what you need to do, you will not be in a situation where you'll be without guidance. So you wouldn't have to be making choices as to what light to move towards. Understood? Now, a lot more information. There's a book called Spiritual You After the Physical You Dies. Yeah, Master C. It goes into what those different lights can be. Some of them are like multicolored light, for example, is dealing with the term that's used off my mind. It's a reincarnation event. It's designed to where sometimes if there's a fork in the road in somebody's life, understood, where it could be a left or A or B type decision or whatever, and the person chose B, maybe the right answer, and then B led to loads of chaos and problems, etc., going down that particular route. When it creates a glitch in the person's, for lack of a better word, etheric record, understood, and if an incarnated master agrees, the person can go back, basically, if they pass through that multicolored light by issue of choice or given that option, they can go back and be basically positioned exactly back in that event and feel like, okay, no, light, come back. Just be placed back in that particular event. Instead of going down to B, you'd have a strong feeling to choose A, understood, and then go down that particular live out that particular course or fate by way of that particular option, understood. So the lights can mean it can be in that instance. Obviously, that's a positive thing for a very specific purpose. Not a certain name. I'm saying reincarnation. It's got a certain name, which I can't think of at the moment. Which happens as a result of that for certain types of scenarios or situations. Now, there's 9 gates that you have to pass through, and there are basically beings from different dimensions who are waiting, as you say, to utilize you potentially for other purposes. They may appear as your grandmother or your mother or people that you know to try and elicit trust. And this is why your ancestors are there to help you so you don't get tricked into moving off of that path. So they'll meet you at the gateway, and then you transition through. So this is why you establish that connection now, so that you will know who to look for and be guided through, as opposed to choice. And if you die in ignorance, then that's where certain things can be a problem. A fearful state, I should say, maybe a better way to say it. Then that's where it can cause you some issues or problems. So this is why you establish the connection from now, to avoid leaving all of that to chance in that particular moment. Any more questions?
Yes. Yeah, some people were saying that they found it difficult to hear you, but it sounded like you just raised your voice. Yeah, we have another question from Irene. Which room or space in the house can you place the altar?
I mean, anywhere where I take it that's, I mean, it could be anywhere. I suppose you may place it in a place that's, I mean, it's a place where you can maybe achieve privacy, because you might want to have certain types of conversation. So it's entirely up to your choice.
Okay. We have another question from Anonymous. Do all of our ancestors speak Nuwapuyi in the spirit world?
It's an interesting question. I don't know the answer to that one. It's an interesting question.
Okay, we have another question from Anonymous again. When they in-house us, as you say, can we also be in-housed by powerful positive ancestors?
Yes, I suppose it works both ways. It works both ways round. But I think as you would see to appear, there are certain rules that they have to follow, so that it's not something that the agreeable ones would do without one's consent.
Okay. We have another question from Corinne. Can you put the title of the book about spirituality in the chat?
Yes, I can do that. Spiritual You After the Physical You Dies, that's the title. If you can type that in the chat, I'll write about something like the Spiritual You After the Physical You Dies. Yeah, it's a master's secret. I think it's also a YouTube video with somebody reading out a version from the temple, not version, but the audio version from the temple, if you can't get the book. And I could place a link for at least one of those parts in there, which somebody has got. So yeah, whilst I'm doing that, if you could, then next question.
A question from Valerie. As we are designed for the dark, why use white cloth and candles as opposed to dark colours?
I don't know, that's probably a question for the master teacher. An interesting question. Doesn't mean white is evil, but obviously it does represent death. So, in that regard. So, people wear black to funerals. That's not a Sabian tradition. Remember, when you see decay or at least a transition into that particular state, that's what white represents. So it's not a negative colour in that regard. It's just obviously from the way it's been used in this society, they've switched the meanings, but it does represent death in our culture. So this is why it's appropriate, I suppose, in terms of that. Death is a doorway, is it not? Understood? So that's what you are effectively are opening, whether it has a specific meaning to a white cloth in that regard. Other than that, I can't speak on that at this particular time. That's a question for master teacher. But certainly when we go to funerals, we wear white. We don't wear black to funerals, as I say, because in nature, that is what that tone of white represents, in the sense it's devoid of, at least in that moment, it's devoid of energy, that type of energy. So life energy. So there's a doorway and a transition that's been opened up, which is designed to help you to open up the gateway in that sense. It's a white candle as well. So as I say, it represents more, see it as a doorway if you're seeing that tone or colour being used in that regard.
That's it for the questions.
Okay, so most men, I can't do two things at the same time. Do that, okay. I'll come back to that. I'll put the video in there, but if you can type that in the chat for them, right, that would be useful. So before the class closes, remind me to put that at YouTube. I think that's come from now. So here it says you have ancestors who are constantly helping you. Suppose something tells you to go left to avoid danger. In fact, your whole family line will be with you your whole life unless you accept a religion other than your own genes or their genomes. Don't do things. They are there to make you stay busy and do what you are supposed to do and to perfect you. So you will have 24 to 24,000 years. That's the ability to reincarnate more than once, to perfect your being. If you do not, your spirit will be evaporated. If you make it, you will make your way to the dark vacuum of space as Mother Nature, from which all things grow. So the fact of the matter is, as I say, we have been limping in the Olympics. I think somebody made a statement to say, and that is because, as I say, we're not calling on these powers. And so I think the important thing to learn is that is their job. I think when we do go probably into the next part, and we look at the adverse to what our culture is dealing with on the negative, we think about witches and warlocks. One of the reasons why they had those titles is because they were trapping spirits, obviously, of their vibration, do you understand, linked to them, and then trapping them and causing them to use their bidding, to do their bidding, in the physical world. And obviously when that person then died, that was when that spirit got revenge or whatever the case may be. Do you understand? So in their genie myth story, that's one aspect of it as well. Do you understand? So when you flip it to the nine side or to our side, you got to understand they're there. Remember, it's all the same genetic line, isn't it? You understand? So remember, you are the one at the top of the pyramid. You are the head of the genetic line at that point. So you've got the ability to change, understand, not just your life, but the sort of family line. So they're there to assist you, which is their job, to help you transition out of the physical and make it to the vibrational states where your own family exists. And otherwise, so you can end up, as we were talking about in the previous class, end up in aspects of you based on your last sort of thoughts, thinking, vibration, end up in places where you're not supposed to be. So this is why their job is to help you, obviously, while you're here in the physical, while you can effect change positively. But if you're ignorant to it, or as we have been ignorant to it, when I say ignorant, ignoring the facts, so we have ignored those realities in favor for other people's religions, then this becomes problematic. And obviously the ultimate there, as you read in that verse, is that you when you're there to transition, you're not strong enough ethically to make that transition, so you'll just return back to the elements, you understand? Because you're not strong enough to retain self, or the aspect of you which you're calling soul, your to retain those things together, so that you're able then to move to higher states of existence. The same way babies are born into babies are born into this world, and sometimes they're not strong enough to make it, and hence, unfortunately, are born stillborn. Understood? It's the same way in that time. But obviously, when our genes were stronger, and still relatively strong, but when our genes were stronger, we could incarnate up to 24,000 times, understood, in order to achieve tatmum, or perfection. Understood? And so that's what it's making reference to there. To make it in one lifetime, obviously, can be difficult. So hence why you have more than one opportunity to perfect your being. And some people choose to come back even if they can ascend, just to get a better the word score. Maybe score is probably a bad word to use, but as I say, your life to become more powerful before they make that next step. But they don't necessarily have absolute recollection of previous lives lived before, and so the memory or the hard drive, so to speak, is whacked. Okay, next bit. Any questions? Further question?
We have another question from Valerie. Oh, hang on. In fact, there was something that I missed. It was actually a reference to a picture that you'd showed earlier on. It says, "I see that the infant is leaned forward, holding its own head, and prefers to be in the darkness, eyes closed." Do you have any comments on that?
I mean, I couldn't say specifically to that image, although it's a very nice image. Obviously, one of the issues is, isn't it, when you're born into this world, you've been in 9 months of darkness for an atypical healthy birth, and you get all these lights shined in your faces. And one of the reasons why you start crying is, one, to remember the original sound of the Big Bang that was made, your Big Bang, when the sperm hit the ovum, but also somebody's shining this bright light in your face. And so it's sensory overload. In ancient times, you stayed in darkness. Babies were born in cave type settings or whatever, and you wasn't brought out into the what you would call not even sunlight. You were brought out at night for the first time, and that optimized your senses. So we didn't necessarily need at one time a telescope to see certain star constellations. We could see them with our own physical eyes because our senses were optimized to the environment. And then what we would call daylight was introduced to us a bit more slowly. So 3 months, even outside of the womb, a further 3 months of physical darkness, or staying in a dark state, is what the baby would need, and then be brought out, as I say, at the appropriate time. So by closing it is, I suppose, arguably peace, as opposed to the chaos of light when the senses are not ready to take all of that sensory information on board.
No other questions.
Okay. Right. So it says, be careful when you call in your ancestors, because all other disembodied spirits are listening and will answer in the form of your relatives. However, they will appear different, perhaps disfigured. What you must do is call on the eldest ancestors first and ask them to protect their descendants so that disembodied spirits cannot come through. Then you may proceed forward. So again, an important step. So it could be your great grandmother, overstood, in your line that you call upon, overstood, and asked to protect the family line, which is their role in terms of that hierarchy. So if you do know then who they are and the various different orders, then if you had multiple to choose from, for example, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever, then obviously look to do the oldest first and then ask for that protection. Yeah, because as I say, many forces there waiting to take advantage of the situation. Obviously, as you know, they can read thoughts, etc., and appear as relatives, but it's giving you there, as I say, a sort of test to see, well, he's got a crooked nose or whatever, and didn't have a crooked nose, then that's an indicator that it may not be all it appears to be. You understand? So and that's why you've obviously made your pictures. So here we see just an extract from Partarak, tones. I think tones or atone Partarak. I can't remember the proper title, I think, but atone Partarak. The important thing here in this particular one is that the C tone here, which we seek to replicate using a harmonium, the Master teacher expressing that that's the closest wind-based instrument that can represent, I suppose, replicate, the natural sound or tones of the Om in this day and time. And this book actually is teaching us as a collective how to make a new Om chant based on our own voices in this day and time. That's what this book's talking about. But the important thing for this particular page is this is in verse 9. As it's saying, so to link to Pasalafu, the ancestors who are now elemental beings, or Achach, Ifrit beings, you need the key of C. Yeah, so we've got A as the tone of the body, F, tone of the planet, and C, major as natural nature of the cosmos. So when one is engaged in the ritual, they would use C tone or C major, whilst obviously having those discussions, you understand, to facilitate that connection. I think on the right side here, this is, I think, a version of C. Digitally. So that's what you would have effectively playing in the background while you're having the conversation with one of your relatives. It could be about various different subjects, just getting to know them if you're just getting to know them, you understand? So if you're that inclined, and asking them or putting your requests upon them. Now, the way in which that's done, to understand the rules of that, I should say, is that Panatharu, I've said this before, but Panatharu are not interested particularly in whether or not you can pay your telephone bill. So if you're struggling with something of that nature, which is specifically to do with you and your life, you don't put a request like that to Nanatharu, not interested. You understand? But your great-grandmother who lived in the physical, or your grandmother who's passed who lived in the physical, understands that. And so you may put a request like that to them because it pertains to you specifically in your life. Panatharu get involved or tend to assist when it's not necessarily directly for you, but it's for a greater purpose. So if it's for the wider benefit of a lot of different people. So for other than self and self, do you understand? Then those requests, I don't know. It could be, I don't know, you're going to help some children, understood, yeah, orphans or whatever, and provide food for them. So you would put the request to your ancestors and ask them to convey that to the Natharu for assistance in that situation. So that's just how you separate the two family states or whatever, or ancestral types in that regard. You need to be clear about that as well. So I think you don't want to reach a state where you're embarrassed to ask, but at the same time, you just need to understand, where you need to direct the request to. And if you're not sure, then obviously ask your physical ancestors, i.e. your blood relative ancestors, and they will, guide you accordingly. So in that regard. So until you test it and put it into practice, you're not going to know if it's I can tell you, I could say it's real all day, but until you put it in and see the benefits and the magic that arises from it, you wouldn't know. You understand? So this is one of the reasons why they kept a lot of these things for you, because this is the real power. And I didn't tell you to sacrifice a chicken. I didn't say you have to sacrifice a goat. You understand? So no blood let in or anything of that nature was needed for you to make that connection. Simply a candle, white tablecloth, a little bit of white sage, and some pictures, and then you got access to a most powerful form of help that you'll ever see in your lifetime. You understand? So put it to use. It's there to help you. They're there to assist you in making this life of yours what it should be. And so, people say, when we go through certain hardships or whatever, people say, that's you're being tested and so on and so forth. And you think to yourself, well, is that really the case? Is it really the case that there's being sitting there designed to make your life wholly difficult and full of struggle, understood, while others seem to be living the life of great success, understood? So I think you have to take an attitude to dash all of that in the bin. You understand? And insert this thing where it wasn't your time, or that this should have happened to you for a reason, blah blah blah, and all this type of stuff. I'm saying at the end of the day, if you're falling out a window, you're supposed to be falling out of a window at the time when it happens, because you could have made different choices that would meant that you weren't falling out of a window. So at the time when it happens, that's what it's meant to happen, not some predestined situation that, okay, I'm supposed to be falling out of a window. You understand? Because that would imply that they want you to be injured, or some force there wants you to be injured. That's not the case. So I think you have to really kind of calibrate certain statements that are used by people, and they have to be analysed, because they may not be factually correct. You understand? Maybe things that people say, like they could die young, for example, they could die at any age. They don't die young, they die at any age. In fact, it's a bad thing to die when you're young, because you might not have balanced out your being before you've transitioned. Somebody dies at 80, has had a lot of life to live, made mistakes, able to correct them, balance, do positive things, negative things, so on and so forth. And certainly maybe more balanced. So it's a blessing to reach old age. So they could die young. It's not a factual statement. So these things need analysing to what is the reality of a number of situations that we find ourselves in. And so, as I say, what you're doing effectively is directing your emotional energy to a place that is of your own genes and ancestry, which is connected, you are connected to by your DNA, and is there to assist you, understand, your kind, to help you to make that ascension journey. Understood? Now, so one of the things that we want to do is want to greet our ancestors accordingly. So this is all about respect and approaching situations with respect, not disrespect. So again, I'm not saying you can't have certain conversations and ask certain things, but again, as you would be in the physical, yeah, certain things you probably were not going to put in front. Not to say that you can't ask for certain things, but think about it. Be respectful. Yeah, so let's watch this short video that will just give an indication of how you perform sign of the triad.
Wu-Sabat, I present to you the Nuwapic greeting known as the sign of the triad is to be performed at various times, such as when you feel the need to show respect when you are in the presence of divine personage, when you view a photo of an ancestor you respect or love, and before and after you present your prayers. To complete the sign of the triad, place your pointer finger above your middle and thumb digits to resemble a triangle. Start from the third eye, Asa, and say, by way of the name of the Father Osiris, Asa. Move down to the left nipple and say, by way of the Virgin Mother, Ashtat, Isis. Then cross over your chest to the right nipple and say, by way of the Blessed Son, Hara, Horus. Then bring your fingers back to Osiris, the third eye, also Asa, then down to the solar plex. The final pose is hands together with a bow.
I'll replay that for people. Let's just see. Watch it one more time.
Wu-Sabat, I present to you the Nuwapic greeting known as the sign of the triad is to be performed at various times, such as when you feel the need to show respect when you are in the presence of divine personage, when you view a photo of an ancestor you respect or love, and before and after you present your prayers. To complete the sign of the triad, place your pointer finger above your middle and thumb digits to resemble a triangle. Start from the third eye, Asa, and say, by way of the name of the Father Osiris, Asa. Move down to the left nipple and say, by way of the Virgin Mother, Ashtat, Isis. Then cross over your chest to the right nipple and say, by way of the Blessed Son, Hara, Horus. Then bring your fingers back to Osiris, the third eye, also Asa, then down to the solar plex. The final pose is hands together with a bow.
So if you want that video and the sort of paper that goes with it, if you leave your email address, if you don't have it, I should say, leave your email address in the chat. Collect that, send that out to you. So this presentation, we have the tones, and that page that we showed you, just proof of connecting to the C major. So just a little bit in this presentation, so you can refer to it, set up your altar, and then, as I say, start to put that into practice, because this is a serious tool that is used to aid our transformation. Do you understand? And it's not something necessarily that I'm saying to say that we widely give it to everybody or whatever, but at least at the end of the day, if you know it and you can put it into practice, it's going to help you solve a lot of problems in your life. You understand? So it's a necessary tool that you have a right to know about it. Don't abuse it. So upload the documents, etc., to Facebook and all that kind of stuff. Although this is on Facebook, but you know what I'm saying. Do you understand? Because just because you don't know whose hands it's going into, so if you are passing on to people, who are sincerely going to use it. I'm not talking to judge different people in that way, but to give it to the people who sincerely are going to use it, so they don't abuse it. Is the most important factor in this. But it's yours to know it's part of your culture, learn it, master it, and say, as I think the master teacher said, once you give them those requests, sit back and watch them, perform the magic or whatever in your life. Now, it might not always come in the form that you're expecting it to, but I suppose you do need to be specific in what you're putting forward as well in terms of your requests. Another thing as well, which is I think important, but be mindful how you use it, is one of the sometimes in issues where we're not progressing is because I think we talked about this last week. It's because we're not directing in certain appropriate instances, necessary force against our enemies. Understood? So sometimes it's necessary to target those enemies of ours, and put your ancestors to work in a positive but also in a protective sense as well. And some people are seeking to make your life difficult, etc. Hidden adverse forces as well as visible adverse forces. So again, we're not dealing with spookism here as we sort of play this particular verse to show you that this is real for you. This is your reality, understood, part of your culture, which they wanted to remove from you because they wanted to keep you in need. They want to keep you powerless, understood. This is just one of our aspects and tools, which is part of our culture, and saying it's natural as picking up the telephone, speaking to a family member. This is how it is for us. You have the apparatus inside of you, as I say, to make that connection. So use it to your direct benefit. Okay, any final questions before we close out today?
There are no further questions. No, there's just some messages in the chat to say thank you for your time and your efforts to raise our spiritual awareness. Thank you so much.
I'm just passing on as a student teacher. It's given to us by Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn. Thank you anyway. So, as I say, importantly, so he's written a lot of stuff over the years and spoken a lot of stuff and taught a lot of stuff over the years. And this, not to separate what's important from what's not important, but this is a very, very powerful set of information that you're being given today. Understood, probably why it led to the chaos in the sound and so on and so forth, which seems to always happen when types of things. So if you do want it, obviously let's wait a few minutes. If you do want the information or you have it already, I know some people do have because we sent it out previously. And so just put your email address in the chat area and we will ensure that you have those details. Please, I'm just saying it to you just as your brother, obviously, who is a student teacher on student environment. Put this into practice, to master it. You're going to see, certain benefits from it. And as I say, your ancient ancestors planned for what is being classed as the afterlife, from now. And that has practical elements as well as spiritual elements. We touched upon this last week as well in terms of life insurance, instructions about how you want your funeral arrangements to happen, etc. So those seem like difficult conversations should not be difficult because you know that the Amun point is there after the Amun point. You understand? Your energy is going to exist even if it's only in the minds of your relatives who knew you, understood, that's still existing past the point of your physical expiry. So these indicators are signs for you to be a lot more confident that you understand there is existence after death. Understood? So, put the work in that preparation for it in any event, understood, so that you are ready whenever death as the doorway comes your way. Okay. Any other questions before we close out?
Yes, there is. From Haniel. What if you don't know any family relative to call on, person like grandparents, because you don't know of them or have pictures, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. Yeah, it's a really good question. You're going to have to find them. You need to search them out as part of your journey, because you need names specifically and pictures as points of focus. So, yeah, I can't say any differently than that. There's been a whole, agenda to stop you from doing that, isn't it? To even care about it. So I know when you go and try and speak to certain relatives, etc., even they don't remember, because we were never taught to place value on those things, isn't it? Jesus, in Jesus' name, and all that kind of stuff. Do you see what I'm saying? So we were taught to bypass the importance of that. Now, today, it's not even done in a way that's specific, isn't it? It's done an ego thing. Oh, let me find out who I am. So, you go to ancestry.com or whatever and find out you're 1/12 Nigerian and 2/3 Puerto Rican or whatever. People find out, I've got white in me. You understand? Like it's a badge of honor. So it's not specific. So, and obviously, as Master said, they're trying to collect people's DNA, which, you don't realize what valuable data that you are giving away by participating in that. As they said, not to do it, in fact, in that regard, because of what they're using it for, looking for certain blood types. So you need to find those pictures. I can't say it any different than that. Till alternative is provided for, that's a journey that you need to look out for and do. You understand? Sometimes you put the thought out there, you understand? Yeah, and put some focus on it. It may come to you. I rarely share personal stuff because I don't want to be this convincing thing, but I've traveled to Ghana at a certain point and asked certain questions, and people they did know and didn't know. You understand? Some people knew the thing, whatever, they didn't know. And as I was leaving, my uncle sort of ran over to me and I found these pictures. And it happened to be my grandmother, my great-grandmother, and my great-great-grandmother. You understand? So those are the only 3 pictures I've got out of my 30. You understand? So that was, I asked for it, but he went to another level to find it for me. Do you understand? So this is what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to search them out. You understand? As best as you can do. But you have a range of prayers and different spiritual things that obviously you can use, but you need to ideally find it. But don't let it dissuade you from doing nothing spiritually just because you haven't got those things. You know, so there's always still benefits from carrying out the rituals. Remember, prayer, meditation, all these things are forms of positive thinking. Yeah, so it's still making that connection, but this is a very specific set of tools that you're seeking to acquire. So you need to search them out. You understand? However way that you find best to do that. Ideally, obviously, from family members, or if you're able, you might have to take a trip home. You understand? Stuff. Yeah, that's how important it is. Anything else? Any other questions?
Yes. How come Caucasian people experience ghost hauntings, yet we don't?
That's a good question, actually. We're covering that the next class, yeah? We'll look at a part of that called The Ghost, and we're walking through it. Yeah? So 6 months in, remember, they have a connection to something called Corriganis, which houses them at the 6-month stage of their birthing process. So we'll touch upon that next class.
Another question. A medium is a person who can communicate in between the spirit world and the physical world. How come they can and we can't?
I remember when we were showing you the electromagnetic spectrum, isn't it? So some people are able to vibrate naturally up and down these spectrums, so they may have a greater awareness to be able to communicate, as I say, with some what they perceive to be relatives, but there's always these discarnate entities that say hanging around. They exist within the same environments as we do. It doesn't mean that you cannot do it. It's just that you've not perfected maybe those skills with the ability to do it. But some people are naturally spiritually sensitive, like we all were, isn't it? When we were children, our pineal gland was much more active, and so we were able to see things beyond what we would classify as the physical world. Things like imaginary friends and things of that nature are real to children, and so we were much more spiritually aware until the world educated us, and constrained a lot of those skills and abilities. So sometimes education or the school system has, and then lack of awareness as well from our parents and the environments that we were in, shut down those powers that we inherently had the ability to be a lot more aware of. Any other questions?
Yes. I think this refers to when you're calling for assistance from your Salafu. Do you call on your maternal grandmother or your paternal grandmother first?
It's not, I suppose, it's not specific. I probably, if you had the choice, I mean, not to separate them, but yes, obviously, of course, you may follow the mitochondrial line. It's more about oldest, so I suppose anything along that fourth generational line you would use, but maybe out of respect, you could certainly use the maternal line, because then it links even back, at least physically, further than that. So that may be a good choice to use, but it's not like a must do. It's just about the older ones in the line, because where they are, they can protect everybody else, and just from a structural perspective. But if you were to use a choice on what was the best one to use, then maternal elder, just because of the mitochondrial link. Any other questions?
No, there are various superlatives to bring attention to the way you handled today's class, the last one. Thank you for a very inspiring and informative class, and there are no further questions.
Okay, no problem. I appreciate those comments, and we thank, our Natharu at Wu-Sabat. Now you know more clearly what that is, and the one sent, Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn, personage of Dr. Malachi Z. York, so we think about him and fight for his freedom, because the sacrifices made have ensured that in this day and time, all that we have gone through, it couldn't stop us from sharing this information with you today. And so that's really, really important. So the next step is to put it into practice if you feel comfortable to do so. So thank you for sharing those email addresses. We'll get that information out to you this week. If you do want it, or you want it at a later time, then next class, request it or put it in the Facebook chat, and we'll pick it up from there. Okay, appreciate everybody's patience today. The gremlins did not overcome the session today. Unfortunately, it's not a final part of Freaks the Perfect Creature. I think we got some more to cover on this, and so we'll be doing more around the adverse side. I think we're talking on the positive side of this, but doing a little bit more on the adverse side and how to protect yourself from the dangers of certain things which are out there. So good question, I think, about the ghost side. So we'll be touching upon that. Mind's eye as well, which is a phenomena that we need to look at. And then, wrap up this with, I think we did touch on it last time, but wrap up, I said, the next class with the interesting thing about collagen and its importance, as say, in the human body, So we're going into some of the science of ourselves in and around that particular aspect of us. Found mainly in our bones, ligaments, etc., etc. As we'll be touching upon that in the next class. Okay, so next class I think is in the first week of December for first Sunday, in December. So back to the usual schedule. So I think that's 2 weeks' time from today. Okay, everybody take care. Again, thank you for your patience. Appreciate all the questions and the comments. We will see you very, very soon. Okay, take care all. And to Sabians on the call, Wadu.